You must have had a change of heart about something.
No, actually, I don't know, because I thought that I would never want to do this show with you.
What happens when a living legend decides she's done staying silent?
I don't like that. And she just was so rude to everybody.
In a single interview, Cher sent shockwaves through the music world. Not with gossip, but with truth. No cryptic tweets, no hidden messages, just names, stories, and decades of emotion finally spoken out loud. Why now? And what made this moment different? There aren't many artists who can claim to have reinvented themselves across 6 decades without losing their core identity. Cher is one of them. She's been a music icon, an actress, a fashion symbol, and a cultural touchstone. Known for her unique voice, bold style, and fearless attitude, she's outlasted trends, generations, and even her own critics. But in a recent podcast appearance, Cher did something that caught even her biggest fans off guard. She named names. The interview, featured on the Originals podcast, wasn't a dramatic tell-all or a PR stunt. It wasn't a vague Twitter thread or a cryptic social media post designed to stir up controversy. Instead, it was a clear, direct moment of reflection, personal and raw. Sitting across from the host, she chose not to speak in metaphors or half-truths. For the first time, she openly listed 5 artists she said she would never work with again. Now, in the entertainment world, that's not a small move. Most public figures, especially those with decades-long careers, tend to avoid naming people when they talk about bad experiences. It's more common to hear vague descriptions like, a certain artist, or someone I worked with years ago. But not this time. Cher broke that unspoken industry rule and made her message impossible to misunderstand. What followed was a wave of reactions, both supportive and shocked. Social media lit up with fans reposting quotes, dissecting her statements, and speculating on the behind-the-scenes stories. Critics and commentators weighed in too. Some praised her honesty, others questioned her intentions. But regardless of which side people landed on, one thing was clear. This wasn't about drama, it was about dignity. According to Cher, her decision to speak out wasn't made lightly. She explained that she had worked with many artists over the years, some brilliant, some difficult, and some unforgettable for the wrong reasons. Her words were sharp, but not spiteful. "I've worked with the best," she said. "I've endured the worst, and I've earned the right to say enough." That quote alone seemed to capture the moment perfectly. It wasn't a list meant to stir up headlines or start feuds. It was about putting a period at the end of certain chapters. She wasn't pointing fingers randomly. Each name she mentioned had a backstory, something deeper than a personality clash or creative disagreement. Behind every person was a history of betrayal, disrespect, or dismissal that had stuck with her over the years. For longtime fans of Cher, the names didn't come out of nowhere. Some had been hinted at in past interviews or gossiped about in fan circles. Others were more surprising, bringing forward stories that had either never been shared publicly or had only existed as rumors. One moment in the podcast stood out more than most. As Cher spoke, she made it clear that she wasn't trying to cancel anyone. Instead, she said she was simply telling her truth. "I'm not burning bridges," she told the host. "I'm just lighting the truth." That phrase, "lighting the truth," quickly became a viral quote. It was shared across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, often accompanied by clips of Cher from different points in her career. In one popular post, a user paired the audio of that quote with a slow-motion montage of her walking on stage during her 1999 Believe tour. Another user added it to a video of her acceptance speech at the Billboard Music Awards. It became a kind of anthem, an emblem of standing up for oneself, even when it's uncomfortable. The public reaction wasn't limited to younger fans or pop culture bloggers. Older generations, including those who had followed Cher since the 1960s, voiced strong support. Many saw her words as a long overdue response to how women, especially older women, in the industry, are often treated. On Reddit, a thread titled, Cher's burn book and Why She's Right shot up to the top of the front page within hours. Some commenters said it felt like she was finally allowed to be as outspoken as her male counterparts have been for years. What also became clear is that this wasn't just about music. It was about how people are treated behind closed doors. Whether it's on tour, in the studio, or at high-profile events, artists can face a lot of pressure to stay quiet, smile for the camera, and let things slide. But according to Cher, silence isn't strength. Speaking out, even if it's decades later, is its own kind of power. Of course, there were critics too. Some argued that bringing up old grievances was unnecessary. Others felt it could reopen past conflicts that were better left in the past. But even among critics, there was a sense that Cher wasn't trying to be cruel. She wasn't dragging people down to raise herself up. She was drawing a boundary, publicly and permanently. Part of what made her words land so deeply was her delivery. She didn't sound angry. She sounded tired of pretending. The tone was calm, firm, and matter-of-fact. That perhaps made the message even stronger. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a reflection, years in the making. There's also the context of Cher's long career. This is someone who's been part of the public eye for over half a century. She's won Grammys, Oscars, and Emmys. She's survived multiple eras of entertainment, from the variety show days of the 1970s to today's algorithm-driven celebrity culture. Through all of that, she's managed to maintain a clear sense of self. And that self, she says, has taken hits behind the scenes that the public never saw. The podcast episode has already been described as one of the most impactful celebrity interviews of the year. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. In an age where so much of the entertainment industry is polished and controlled, hearing someone at Cher's level speak plainly about their past stood out. More importantly, it sparked a wider conversation. Across social platforms, people began sharing their own stories of being overlooked, dismissed, or used by people they trusted. Many pointed to Cher's interview as the nudge they needed to speak up. One viral tweet summed it up simply: Cher isn't mad. She's just finished pretending, and that's a lesson. Whether people agree with her or not, the impact of what she said is undeniable. It has opened a new chapter in how veteran artists choose to speak about their careers, not just the highs, but also the moments that left a mark. Cher didn't name names to destroy reputations. She named them to reclaim her own. When Cher decided to speak out about the artists she would never work with again, she didn't just drop names and move on. She took the time to explain why. Each name carried its own emotional weight, not just for her, but for fans and industry insiders who had followed her long and varied career. What made the revelations so powerful was that they weren't vague or shallow. They were full of personal context, of years of reflection, and in some cases, decades of disappointment. These were not passing frustrations. These were moments that helped shape who she is today. The first story she shared was about Gene Simmons, the bassist and co-lead singer of Kiss. Their relationship in the late 1970s seemed like an odd match to many people at the time. Cher, known for her glammed-up, high-fashion presence, and Simmons, with his black leather and face paint, looked like they came from two completely different planets. But behind the scenes, it quickly became clear that their differences ran deeper than style. Cher described how at first, Gene was respectful and even affectionate. He told her she was the only real woman in Hollywood. But as time went on, that support turned into something else. According to Cher, he began to downplay her musical talents and mocked her TV background. In one alleged interview with Rolling Stone, Simmons reportedly said she wasn't a real rocker, just someone who looked the part. Things got worse during rehearsals for a show they had planned together. Cher claimed that Gene would speak to the crew as if she wasn't the headliner, telling the sound engineer to turn her volume down and joking that she was just the opening act. One moment in particular stood out to her. He allegedly told her to wear less feathers, more leather, if she wanted to be taken seriously. Cher said that was the turning point. The final straw came when Simmons reportedly asked a promoter to cut her solo set to just 2 songs. That, she said, was the moment she knew. She wasn't his equal. She was his accessory. They broke up not long after. When asked in the podcast if she'd ever consider a reunion or musical collaboration with him, her response was blunt. He got a shot. He blew it. The next name came as a surprise to many. Tina Turner. The idea that these two powerhouse women, both survivors of male-dominated music worlds, would have a falling out seemed almost unthinkable. In the late 1980s, they collaborated on a song and a short European tour. Fans and media alike celebrated it as a moment of historic significance, 2 icons joining forces. Their duet, Shame, 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 was fierce and full of soul, and behind the scenes, Cher says it felt like they were building something meaningful. But things began to fall apart quickly. Cher recalled that although they had strong chemistry in the studio, the way the collaboration was marketed started to change. Press releases began to describe the single as Tina's song featuring Cher, rather than as a joint effort. Magazine covers started excluding Cher from photo shoots. Even the tour rehearsals shifted in tone. Cher said she was treated like a backup singer, and Tina allegedly avoided eye contact during sound checks. One of the most painful moments, according to Cher, happened backstage at the Grammys. They were both nominated that year, and Cher had arrived hoping to reconnect. She says Tina walked past her without saying a word. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just silence. Later, when Tina won an award, she thanked her team, her band, her manager, but not Cher. She erased me, Cher said, from everything we had built. Despite all this, Cher made it clear she still respected Tina as a performer and a survivor. But the experience changed how she viewed their friendship. When asked if she would ever consider reconnecting, Cher didn't hesitate. "I don't hold grudges," she said, "but I never forget being cut out of my own art. That's not a sister. That's a rival with a nice smile." The third person Cher mentioned was Adam Lambert, a much younger artist who rose to fame after his appearance on American Idol. Early in his career, Cher had been one of his most vocal supporters. She praised his bold stage presence and said he reminded her of what made people uncomfortable about her back in the 1970s. She didn't just admire him from afar, she supported him directly. She even performed with him during a Las Vegas concert and reportedly helped him land a major international gig by making a behind-the-scenes call. But once Lambert's career took off, Cher says the communication stopped. There were no thank you messages, no acknowledgments in interviews or album notes. When he eventually took the stage with Queen, something Cher said she had congratulated him on privately, she was met with silence. And then came the interview. When Lambert was asked which living artist had influenced him the most, he listed 5 names. Cher wasn't one of them. "I wasn't looking for a parade," she said, "but I didn't expect to be erased." Fans had long hoped for a collaboration between the two, but Cher made it clear. "He held my respect, then he lost it." Then came Madonna. Rumors of a rivalry between Cher and Madonna have been swirling for decades. Both are strong, outspoken women who changed the rules for what female pop stars could be. On the surface, it might have seemed like a perfect match, but behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. Cher recalled how, in the early 90s, their teams had explored the idea of a duet. A track was even sent over for review. But Madonna reportedly rejected it with a single word: dated. That set the tone for what came next. In an interview shortly after, Cher described Madonna as unbelievably creative, but also unbelievably rude. The tension didn't stop there. Cher claimed Madonna used to mock her outfits at award shows, and even refused to perform at an event unless Cher stepped off the stage. She didn't want to be friends, Cher said. She wanted to be the only one. For fans still hoping for a duet between the two legends, Cher offered little hope. "It will never happen," she stated, "and I'm fine with that." The final and most emotional name on Cher's list was Sonny Bono. Their story is one that fans know well, at least the public version. They were once America's favorite musical duo. With their hit show, their matching costumes, and their catchy songs, Sonny and Cher became household names. But what many didn't see was the control behind the scenes. Cher revealed that Sonny managed almost everything, often without her input. She wasn't fully aware of the contracts she signed. She didn't have control over the money. But the moment that stayed with her the most happened during a live performance in Las Vegas. After a particularly strong solo set, Sonny returned to the stage and, in front of a packed audience, made a joke about her weight. "Maybe lay off the donuts," he said. The crowd laughed. Cher smiled through it. But inside, she said, she was crushed. "That moment changed how I felt about being on stage," she said. "I never trusted it the same way again." Despite their later public appearances and her respectful comments after his death, the pain of that era stayed with her. "He gave me my start," she said, "but he also tried to keep me at the starting line." When the interview dropped, the reaction was immediate. Cher's revelations didn't just stay within fan circles or entertainment gossip columns. Within minutes, they were trending globally. Social media turned into a real-time discussion board as people tried to process what they'd just heard. The hashtags #SureSaidIt, #QueenOfTruth, and Never Again Tour started climbing the charts. People weren't just reacting, they were connecting. Across Twitter, fans quoted lines from the podcast, pairing them with old photos of Cher performing in sequins and sunglasses. On TikTok, users created dramatic readings of her words, set to slow-motion footage from her films and concerts. One particularly popular clip showed the famous Moonstruck slap scene with her quote, "I'm not burning bridges, I'm just lighting the truth," overlaid in bold letters. It struck a nerve. But beyond the memes and creative content, there was something more serious happening too. People began reflecting on their own experiences. The stories Cher told of being talked over, used, underestimated, or erased were painfully familiar to many. Particularly for women in creative industries, her words felt like a kind of cultural permission slip. Not a call for drama, but a quiet, powerful reminder that it's okay to speak up. That it's okay to stop making excuses for people who didn't treat you right. Comment threads filled with personal stories. People described their own Gene Simmons, their own Tina Turner moments, the time they supported someone only to be left out later, or how they were pushed to the sidelines by someone who once called them a partner. Cher's interview, while focused on the music industry, tapped into a more universal feeling, the sense of being overlooked or used, and the strength it takes to say, "That's enough." It didn't take long before celebrities started responding too. Some of them were subtle, offering support without naming names. Others were more direct. Singer Pink tweeted, "It takes guts to say the stuff most people only whisper. Mad respect." Another artist reposted the line about Madonna with a fire emoji and the caption, "That tea is scorching." Even radio stations joined in. Across several cities, stations played "Believe and If I Could Turn Back Time" back to back, calling it Cher Appreciation Day. It wasn't official, but it didn't need to be. On Reddit, a thread titled "Cher's Burn Book and Why She's Right" racked up tens of thousands of upvotes in less than a day. Users debated the details of each story, shared archived interviews, and tried to piece together timelines. But underneath the curiosity was a tone of validation. A user wrote, "She's not bitter, she's just done pretending it didn't happen." Another posted, "She's not trying to destroy anyone, she's just saying, 'I remember.'" That phrase, "I remember," seemed to summarize the entire interview. Cher wasn't demanding apologies. She wasn't trying to restart old feuds. She was setting the record straight, not for publicity, but for peace of mind. And that message hit home for people of all ages. Younger fans saw a fearless woman taking control of her narrative. Older ones saw someone who had carried herself with grace for decades, finally giving herself permission to be fully honest. In interviews following the podcast, Cher clarified that she didn't feel angry. In her words, she felt free. Free from the pressure to make others comfortable, free from the fear of being called difficult, and free from having to sugarcoat her experiences for the sake of keeping the peace. She wasn't out for revenge. She was simply drawing a line. That distinction matters. In a culture where public call-outs can quickly turn into online takedowns, Cher's tone was something different. She didn't shout, she didn't mock, she didn't laugh at anyone's expense. What she did instead was speak plainly. She remembered how people had treated her and said she no longer wanted to carry those memories silently. For many, that felt like the most grown-up, grounded way to handle long-held pain. The podcast also reignited interest in Cher's legacy, but not in the usual way. It wasn't about her chart-topping hits or red carpet fashion. It was about her resilience. The fact that she had continued to thrive in an industry that had often tried to control, dismiss, or belittle her made people look at her career with fresh eyes. Interviews from the past resurfaced, showing how often she had downplayed her own discomfort or tried to brush off comments that clearly stung. This new moment, however, was about no longer brushing anything aside. What also stood out to many listeners was how clear-eyed Cher was about each situation. She didn't pretend she hadn't benefited from certain relationships. She didn't deny the talent or influence of the people she mentioned. What she questioned was how those moments had made her feel, and why she had waited so long to acknowledge that publicly. In the days following the interview, think pieces appeared across media platforms. Writers explored how older women in entertainment are often discouraged from sharing their stories unless they fit a certain tone: nostalgic, polite, non-confrontational. Cher's interview disrupted that expectation. It wasn't angry or nostalgic. It was honest. One journalist put it this way: "We've spent years celebrating Cher's reinventions, her music, her fashion, her performances. But this might be her most powerful transformation yet. A woman who no longer feels the need to be liked in order to be heard." That statement resonated across fan bases. People shared stories of artists, mentors, and collaborators they had supported, only to be left behind. Some even created art inspired by Cher's quotes. Paintings, poetry, digital posters, all highlighting the theme of being forgotten and the courage it takes to remember out loud. Perhaps the most telling reaction of all came from fans who didn't just admire Cher as a performer, but saw her as a person. They understood that speaking out wasn't about dragging people through the mud, it was about self-respect. One fan wrote, "She was there before Madonna, before MTV, before pop music was even taken seriously as art. She doesn't need to defend her place, she just chose to explain why she's done defending theirs." In the final part of the podcast, Cher summed up everything in one sentence. "People think I'm tough because I survived the industry, but I'm strong because I refuse to be erased by it." That line landed with the weight of experience behind it. A reminder that surviving isn't the same as thriving, and that true strength comes not from silence, but from telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. This wasn't a cancellation. It wasn't a feud revival. It was something far more grounded. Cher was closing chapters, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The man who hushed her on stage, the woman who shut her out of a duet, the artist who erased her influence, the lover who made her feel small. She was done carrying the weight of those memories alone. She didn't ask for an apology. She didn't demand retribution. She simply said, "I remember, and I'm done pretending I don't." In an industry obsessed with reinvention, Cher has always stood apart. She never needed to become someone else to survive. She just needed time. Time to tell her story on her terms. And when the moment came, she didn't whisper it. She didn't dress it up. She just said it. Not to get even, but to get free.